You gotta take some risks if you want a big payoff.
What are you gonna do with all that money if you're dead?
At least I'll die with a rich man's smile.
In my video a few weeks back, I said I didn't think we were watching a Kingpin origin story, but here we are. Miles completing his turn in the 6th episode of For All Mankind's 4th season was not my favorite thing the show's done, but it does work to complicate an already bonkers situation further. In contrast, there's a small character moment where Margo and Aleida, who aren't in the same room, but are listening to the same conversation, object to what they're hearing in the same way. Then Margo says what they're both thinking out loud. But the whole point of the project is that it's not just for us today, it's for the future. It's right there in the name of the show, and as we make our way to not only the end of this season, but also the end of the original characters' runs, the obstacles that need to be overcome are impressive. There's a point here about the balance between what's good in the short term and the things that fundamentally transform our world for the better. As things are, usually short-term gains take precedence, which is illustrated nicely in the union subplot. Samantha sees an opportunity to improve the workers' conditions, but nobody wants to give up the bonuses they could take home right now. Miles decides to operate outside of the system altogether because he's willing to take on the extra risk now that he's experienced the higher rate of return. To get into the details of what happened in the episode, which is titled Leningrad instead of St. Petersburg, because the city's name was never changed back in the alternate timeline, the special meeting of the Mars Oversight Board is held there. Irina leads the summit, and all of the M7 member nations have representatives present. Margo is there, but she's tucked safely away watching on a 3-monitor setup that puts the top-of-the-line monitor I had in 2003 to shame. As she watches the delegates come in, the Helios rep catches her eye. And sure enough, when they get inside, she realizes it's Aleida. Eli Hobson tells the delegates that Happy Valley could have a capture mission ready to go in 8 weeks. The timeline is tight, but they think it's doable. Capture is only the first step, though. And when Aleida breaks down the details of how much new equipment they'll need, the real problems start to come to light. She fires off a crazy list that includes 11 new spacecraft and 2,500 individual vehicles. This number appears to shock everyone, including Irina, but Margo tells her through her earpiece that those sound like conservative numbers. She was thinking they would need something closer to 4,000 vehicles. The projections come down to a minimum capitalization cost of $2 trillion for Helios to get things rolling after the capture. This doesn't seem like a big deal to Aleida, who thinks like an engineer. It's less than 10% of the potential revenue of $20 trillion. Eli explains that money isn't really the issue. The US and the Soviet Union could come up with it if they wanted to. Heck, in our timeline, the US started the Iraq War in 2003, which cost more than $2 trillion when all was said and done. Politically, Eli and Irina say that they want all the M7 nations to pony up because they all have to have skin in the game if they want to benefit. And that's even doable, so the real problem is the return on investment, and specifically the 30 to 40 years it will take to realize it. They threaten to drop the whole thing, which seems more like a negotiating tactic, because even though they don't say it here, Margo mentions it later. Another issue is that Helios is the only party that benefits right away, through the manufacturing contracts they'll pull in. The threat is enough to elicit a response from both engineers at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, and I really liked how in step Margo and Aleida were with each other's thinking throughout this sequence. Margo says this is literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Aleida backs that up by saying they have a unique chance to do something that will benefit the entire Earth. The sentiment doesn't change anything, but hearing it gives Eli an idea. What if they sent Goldilocks towards Earth instead? They could use the existing infrastructure for extracting helium-3 on the moon to start mining the asteroid immediately, without having to send thousands of people and thousands of new vehicles to Mars. Obviously, this would mean a significantly quicker return on investment and an opportunity for companies other than Helios to make money. This sounds fantastic on paper, and actually does solve most of their problems. What could possibly go wrong? Behind closed doors, they try to imagine how they would bring Goldilocks to Earth. Math isn't on their side. It could take centuries to drag it, so Margo brings up DART, which happened much earlier in the For All Mankind timeline. NASA conducted the double asteroid redirection test in 2022, smashing a spacecraft into an asteroid to change its course. Margo throws out other ideas that range from ion beam shepherding to nuclear bombs in space. But as they check each idea off the list, it becomes clear that none of them will work right out of the box. Irina calling DART BART highlights one of the problems with the current setup. And while Margo believes this is an engineering problem that can be solved, there isn't much time. This leads Margo to a drastic solution. She wants to come out of hiding and work with Aleida, which is much easier said than done. First of all, Aleida thinks she's dead. She's thought that for 9 years. Finding out she's alive now might not go over so well. Plus, they have to imagine that she'll pass this information on when she goes back to the US, to the powers that be. Which means Moscow would want to get in front of that and announce her defection first. This will lead to her being labeled a traitor and create a situation where no one will trust her in either country. It's so extreme that Irina can't fathom why she would put herself through it. She's basically going to make herself the most hated person in the United States. So she wants to know why she's really doing it. She admits that she does want to be in charge of Star City's Goldilocks capture operations, and Irina misunderstands this as a lust for power and likens it to a drug. Margaret tells her what we already know from following the character for so many seasons, that this work is her drug. From there, she goes to Aleida's room. She had mentioned in an earlier conversation that it had a shared bathroom, which allows Margo to be there waiting when she gets back from her shower. She's shocked to see that she's still alive, and she runs straight over to hug her, which is kind of a surprise. But it's a real reaction knowing how much she means to her. And it's followed up by anger as the reality of her being alive all that time sets in. Margo explaining what happened provides resolution for Aleida, who's been trying to figure out what happened with the engine design since the Mars 94 rescue 9 years ago. This is why this hits so hard, and it even goes beyond that because we've been watching everything these two characters have been through to get to this place since the 1960s. It's the perfect setup for one of the best scenes of the season. Margo explains her ordeal and allows Aleida to unload about the day of the JSC bombing, and it carries all that history with it. Margo tries to justify her decisions, but doesn't argue when Aleida says, after all this time, you still think you did the right thing. It's incredibly powerful when she demands that she stop saying she didn't have a choice. She had choices all along, but she didn't make them. And not because she's right, which she is, but it works because we understand why each character sees things the way they do, and understand that it's a really complicated situation. When Aleida talks about what it was like to be there on the day of the attack and the people who died, and she confirms how Bill ended up in the wheelchair and how Peanut was lucky, Coral Pena makes this her episode. The way she tells her about thinking she was in heaven and how she hoped and prayed Margo was there too, and then on the way out seeing her longtime assistant who died at her post. It's a moving performance, and you believe Margo when she says she wishes she was there sitting at her desk at her post too. But we know Aleida, and we know it's too late for that. And Margo still manages to get her to agree to the work because she does know her and does know that she'll regret it when she eventually figures out the solution and it's too late. She can hate her if she wants, but she has to concede that Margo knows about regret, and she's right. She'd never forgive herself. So they work the problem. It's a bittersweet beginning to Margo's final chapter. There is no coming back from this, and we see her announce her defection on TV, where she reads a statement that's pure propaganda. The one bright spot is that she will be leading Star City's team and that they did solve the problem. They solved it together. Goldilocks is on its way to Earth, but Aleida can't even watch the news report, and her turning off the TV doubles as the fade to black. While that might have been the most compelling part of the episode, a whole lot of other stuff happened too. Ed wakes up with nothing to do, which leads to a montage with Frank Sinatra's That's Life playing in the background, total Ed song. He makes his bed and sparks a joint, and I guess, why not? When I say he has nothing to do, he really has nothing to do. He watches a video of Kelly and Alex on board the Helios transport that gives him a smile. Then after some reading, he tries to take a nap, and that leads to a drink that gives him an idea. He heads downstairs, and after mixing it up a little with everyone he passes on the way, he shocks Ilya by showing up at the speakeasy. The first half of what Ed does in this episode is fun, or at least it's fun to watch. The little things like him making his bed before the joint and doing modified exercises because of his age are fun reminders of who he is, and he's still capable of surprising us because who knew he had so much experience with black market booze? Turns out he had moonshine on carriers, cruisers, mass units, isolation chambers, jail cells, churches, moon bases, and space stations. And they lean into this idea of him getting old whenever he starts to repeat the exact same list about smuggling operations. He does know enough to tell Ilya how to fix his still, and that earns him free drinks for life. And as far as this goes, basically the bar was less of a secret than Ilya thought. It was tolerated because it probably improved morale overall. Admiral Baldwin ties one on and then passes out in the middle of the afternoon. He wakes up to another smoke because why not? Only to be interrupted like a teenager in their bedroom by Palmer. Danny removed him as XO, and that means he's no longer part of the chain of command for Happy Valley, but he still works for Helios. He's a senior project manager, and Palmer needs his signature on some paperwork about the new bonus rates. Ed takes it and tells him it's under review and closes him out of his room. This is also fun, but this is where I started to consider what was motivating these things that he's doing. Rather than him being out there to blow off some steam, this is all about causing trouble because of his conversation with Danny. Which changes a lot because this is basically him acting out because he's not getting his way. Another character who is not getting their way is Miles, at least not in the beginning of this episode. He gets shut down at the warehouse, and Faiza tells him not to come back. Then he gets a more direct threat from a giant man that acts as Ilya's muscle. This is his reaction to the Mars Rock side gig, and it leaves Miles effectively locked out. Considering that his wife bought a house in the last episode, this isn't something he can live with. In a move I didn't see coming, he goes to talk to Lee in the North Korean zone. He tells him the truth about Ilya stringing him along about bringing his wife up, and then hints that he could probably make it happen, but he'll need help taking care of Ilya. And then Lee provides him with his own muscle. I don't know, it was kind of bizarre considering how the North Koreans were introduced. But these guys go and they beat the crap out of Petros, and from there it's on. Ilya finds out and goes to confront Miles, and his thugs show up again. And then Miles just pushes them out. He takes over the speakeasy and the shipping operation, and now he's just running the place. He even delivers a "you're welcome to stop by any time" and says he won't forget that Ilya helped him when he needed it most. And that's where they leave it, and I really don't even know what else to say about that. Finally, in the more compelling of the two workers' stories, Sam calls a meeting to get everyone to work together to form a union. It's a smart idea and a time when they have real leverage. But those lucrative bonuses they might get are standing in the way of worker solidarity. Right up until Ed arrives to share some pretty damning information. He has proof that Helios is changing the bonus structure, which makes them a lot less valuable. Of course, it's been established throughout the season that Ed doesn't really care about their working conditions. But in this case, his trying to create chaos for Danielle might lead to something good for the workers, who are chanting for a strike by the end of the scene. It makes you wonder what Deb is going to walk into when he gets there. And we didn't really see a lot of Danny in this episode, but in the one scene where she did talk to Palmer and they saw how crazy this capture mission was going to be, the one thing she stressed was that she came there to prove that Happy Valley was worth it, that the people who died there didn't die in vain, and if they can do it, that she's going to get this rock, or she's going to die trying. I had some concerns going in about how they were going to make the Margo and Aleida reunion happen, and I thought they did a terrific job. It was believable in how the characters experienced it and how it fit into the story they've been telling. Coral Pena and Wren Schmidt matched the emotional level of the big Ed and Danny showdown in the last episode, and it's kind of wild that we've had these two giant, generational moments, and we've still got 4 episodes to go. It's starting to set in that we're likely seeing the end of some, if not most of these characters' decades-long stories, and they're making these scenes count. The exploration of what's possible and what's possible politically in the sense of what actually gets done is captivating. Even when some of the parts aren't working as well for me, I like the ideas, if not the execution. And I think that is a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.